In this lesson, we'll be taking a look at how to use timers to invoke repeating methods and functions. We'll create a simple proof of concept first. We'll start by typing tmr equals timer.perform with delay, open and close parentheses. TMR is simply a variable. There's no local in front of it because we're going to want to access this variable across this entire script. So we're making it a global variable. Within the parentheses, the first argument is the time between invocations. So here we'll type 1000 for 1000 milliseconds, comma. Now we type the method name to invoke. Here we'll type printit. Notice that we don't have the printit method created. We'll create that in a minute. Comma. The final argument is how many times the timer should be called. If you want the timer to loop infinitely, then you'll type -1. Otherwise, a positive value will run the timer for that value. So if you put a 10 in there, it'll invoke 10 times and then stop. Okay, let's create the printit function. We'll create that before the timer declaration. Local function printit and then end. And now within the function, we'll simply call some text to be printed to the terminal. Print and then start a string, exclamation point, stop the string. Okay, I've got the project loaded into the simulator already. Let's relaunch it. So every second now, you see that an exclamation point is being written to the terminal. We'll go back, let's comment this out, save it, and relaunch. This is a crude way to stop the timer. We don't want it running in the background while we're coding. Okay, so now let's create a method to kill the timer. I have no objects on the display, so I'll create a simple runtime event listener to listen for a touch event and then kill the timer. So runtime, notice the capital R, add event listener, and we'll listen for the touch event, and we'll call a method called killit. Now, let's create the killit method. Local function killit. Okay, and we are going to be accepting the touch object in the form of E. Now, if E.phase double equals ended, so if the finger has been released, then timer.cancel and then the name of the timer reference, which is TMR. Okay, let's go back to the simulator, bring up the terminal, and relaunch. So now the method is firing. Let me clear the terminal, Apple K. And if I click the screen, notice how the timer stops. That's because the timer.cancel method was called and the reference to the timer was fed in. An obvious use of timers is to spawn objects on the display at regular intervals. Let's create an example. First, we'll create some constants. _h equals display.content height. We use this one a lot. _w equals display.content width. This caches the content height and width properties of the device, so we don't have to constantly call them. And we're also going to cache the math.random function, mrand equals math.random, but without the parentheses. This will give us some performance tweaks, especially if you're going to be coding a large game. It's good to cache these math functions that you're going to use over and over. Okay, so we know we'll need a timer, so let's code that first. TMR equals timer dot perform with delay, and we'll say every second, so 1000, and we'll call the method Spawn Orb, and we'll call it 5 times. So this will not be a timer that just stops, or that, sorry, it will be a timer that stops. It won't be a timer that goes infinitely. Now let's create the Spawn Orb function. Local function Spawn Orb. And within this function, we will call a display object. It's an orb that I've created, and it's in the images directory. Local orb equals display dot new image rect. Okay, we use the image rect because I'm preparing content scaling images. Images slash blue orb dot png, comma, and it's 45 by 45. Okay, let's do some initialization. Orb semicolon, I'm sorry, orb colon, set reference point display dot center reference point. Here's where we're going to use the math.random function. Essentially, every second we're going to spawn an orb on the screen, and what we're going to do is randomly place that orb within the bounds of the screen. So here, orb.x equals mrand. Remember, that's an alias for math.random. And the first value is the low part of the random range. The second value is the high part of the random range. So 50, comma, then the content width minus 50. So essentially 50 pixels padding on either side of the X. Now orb.y equals mrand, and the same thing except the content height, 50, comma, underscore h minus 50. Okay, let's save it. And now we see the orbs spawning. Of course, they're spawning on top of each other. We would have to code a method for them not to do that. But anyhow, we won't necessarily worry about that now. We'll relaunch it again. Okay, and there are the orbs randomly being placed on the screen. I found when I ran this a few times, I didn't quite like the random distribution, so the algorithm I'm using is very basic here, just essentially a random number generator generating random x and y. But to really get some better values, you're going to have to massage the random number generator a little bit.